Welcome aboard this week's podcast of Dudes Dish Disney. Get ready for amazing attractions across America. Beer halls and bar rooms, banquets and beverages, a collection of characters and colleagues.
No cupcakes.
It's Dudes Dishing Disney. This episode of Dudes Dish Disney is sponsored by Magic Vacations. Magic Vacations. Discover the magic of travel. And now your hosts, the dudes of Dudes Dish Disney.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Dudes Dish Disney. Joining us today is our producer and resident tech, dude, Jonathan.
What's going on, guys?
Also joining us is our co-host, Ryan. He is the number one Disney dude.
I always know it's going to be a good episode when Carl starts to morph into Goofy in the opening line. What's up, dudes?
And I'm Congo Carl, former Jungle Cruise skipper, here to guide you through this week's episode of Dudes Dish Disney. But wait, there's more. We've got a special guest. Nicole is back. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, dudes. What's going on?
What's up, Nicole?
What's going on?
Oh, I'm more excited about that than you guys were.
We're very
You're
excited.
really excited today.
You're like over the top excited right now.
You're
This is
like,
not
you're
your
like a
normal you.
surprise 70-year-old man today.
Been a long day,
figured
Carl.
that out.
Man. You know, I did I tell you I made 12 sales calls today? 12 sales appointments today?
As a salesperson, I will tell you that is, you're like a spry 58-year-old man. That's impressive.
That's a lot.
taking
You know,
12
the
years
first
off
one
my
was
life for that.
first one was coffee, the second one was breakfast, there was a bunch in between, there was a lunch one, and then the last one, of course, was cocktails, and another one was cocktails and dinner. But I got it all in and then done by 7:30. So that was
So for those of us who aren't in sales, that was basically Carl's way of saying, I got the company to pay for all of my food and all of my drinks today, and I had a great day.
actually no. This one it doesn't work that way. But yeah, back in the day, that would have been the plan.
Yeah.
But look at So I'm excited to be here and excited that those 12 appointments are past me, because this is a lot more fun. And the reason it's fun is because Nicole's got a great idea for us to talk about on this week's episode. Nicole, why don't you tell our listeners about this special event concept?
So we know that Disney has special events throughout the year, such as the Not So Scary Halloween Party and the Very Merry Christmas Party, Jollywood Nights. Those are kind of holiday themed, right? But then they also do after hours events where you're paying to just essentially go in and enjoy the park with smaller crowds in the evenings. So my thought is, what are they missing? What else should we be having for these special events, for these parties of some kind, or specialty, someone help me out, ticketed events? There's going to be a ticket just for these events. What would the theme of it be? Would it be specific to a certain time of the year, holiday season, that kind of thing? What park would you have it held in, would be hosting? Are there some characters that maybe you don't typically see out and about during the day that would be good to have at your event? Is there maybe a show or some special dining or something like that would be involved that you might want to have? So I'm thinking that we're designing a specially ticketed event for Disney, because I think that there might be a market for some other things there that they're not tapping into. And since I know that the execs listen to this show and follow your ideas for bars and things like that, maybe, next year, 2025 is going to see a new special event.
I like this because it's a culmination of a couple of things, Nicole. You've taken our Imagineering armchair and then you've weaved it into our fine expertise for drinking and dining, right? And you've those types of shows, and then you've kind of taken everything that we do here on this podcast for the last 5 seasons, and you're saying, throw down the gauntlet, throw down the challenge, use your knowledge to create the event of all events.
Right. Something I'm going to pay $179.99 for a few hours of entertainment, right? Ballpark.
Somebody especially ticketed prices today.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Who wants to kick us off? Who wants to kick us off with their idea on the event of events? Or should we just lean back on Nicole and say, Nicole, give us an example of what you're thinking?
I think you got to put the spotlight on the guest first, right? Like this is Nicole's baby. So. This is her idea. She brought it on us. Let's see what she's got.
All right. So, I mean, I actually kind of brainstormed a couple different things that go in some different directions, but I'll start with something that's a little bit more, I feel like on the obvious side and mainstreamed. And then I want to see what you guys come up with and build to that. But so I think that something that there's an appetite for that Mickey's Not So Scary doesn't really touch on is something that celebrates the villains a little bit better and a little bit more exciting way. So I'm thinking of some sort of villainous celebration, obviously still the same time frame of fall, right? Like September, October time frame, because we're tapping into Halloween. I can imagine it being something kind of like what they're doing with the Very Merry Christmas Party and Jollywood Nights, which is kind of offsetting them a little bit. So you're not closing Magic Kingdom early quite so many nights in a row or within a given week. I'd probably also still put it over at Hollywood Studios. I think it could play well in certain parts there. So I'm imagining things like you've got Ursula over by the Little Mermaid show area over there. You've got Vader and stormtroopers taking over Galaxy's Edge. You maybe turn one of the areas, either the indoor theater where Frozen is during the day or the outside theater where the Beauty and the Beast show is. Maybe Maleficent has some sort of show, right, that celebrates her villainy and her story. She's a super popular, I think, villain within the catalog. I imagine having a nighttime show using that same theater, the same space as Fantasmic, but instead of all the princesses and princes coming along at the end, let's have the villains, triumphant and the music and the kind of intensity that goes along with that. I'm not imagining it being totally adult only, right? It's still Disney. You're still going to want some kids to play into it. So over in that animation courtyard area, they have during the day a Disney Junior dance party. You already have a space there. Bring in some of the characters from things like Descendants, which if you have a child probably between like 16 and 4, they've somehow been part of this Descendants movement over the last several years. So I can see bringing some of that in as well. And, your drinks are going to be looking like potions. They're going to be green and purple and dry ice is going to be used or whatever, right? They're going to look cool. Your treats are going to, sweets and treats are going to take on some of that vibe too. So I think you could probably use some of the same things that they already have out seasonally or that they're using over at Not So Scary, but make them a little bit more villainous and scary. I think it gives you a slightly more grown-up alternative to trick-or-treating around Magic Kingdom and that kind of thing, right? I don't imagine that piece of it that's happening at Not So Scary, but I think you could still get a lot of elements into it. And I see it as almost a potential middle ground between Not So Scary and something that's way too scary, like Halloween Horror Nights across town for some people. And you can still access some of those really popular rides like Rise of the Resistance at night with a shorter wait time. So that was one of the first thoughts that I had.
I think that's great. I think that's great. I had 2 thoughts. Number one, my daughter and about 8 of her friends went as Red this year for Halloween. So spot on with the Descendants comment, which your kids are all in that range too. So I'm sure you get it.
Right. And I mean, we had Mal and her friends. So that's where the series started, right? Years ago. My oldest one is that. So you hit even these preteens and teens who have a nostalgia for it. and they don't want to admit it, but if that song, some of those songs came on, they're kind of grooving along to it. And, you know, if parents have a bubbly potion drink, maybe it's not so bad to go to a Descendants dance party.
Yeah. I was actually wondering at first if Hollywood Studios is the right place for it, right? Because when you said villainous, I was thinking like you got to have like Maleficent's castle, or you have to have like that kind of backdrop for it. But as you went through it, and you were like, hey, we can take zones, right? And we can zone out Darth Vader and Kylo back in Galaxy's Edge, but you could put whatever. I immediately went like, how cool would it be for Sid to just be walking up and down through Toy Story, right? Like that would be super awesome to have that experience there. And yeah, you could very easily section out different places, and like that's what Hollywood Studios is, right? It's a backdrop for Disney movies and character making. So it would make total sense to have them just that be the place that they reform for any of these shows, much less, or any of these late night events, much less maybe a villainous one. But the reverse Phantasmic had me, Nicole. That's that, I was like, hell yeah, let the villains win that one. Like Moana falls in, right? Like, sorry, just kidding, right?
Just lava everywhere or something like that, right?
Just big voice that comes up and is like, got her, and that's it. Show over.
Like game over. Just.
I mean, I think it could be really cool at Epcot too, right? Yeah. And just because Spaceship Earth could be such a cool backdrop for the LEDs to work their magic for something like that. But yeah, Hollywood Studios that's a great spot for it.
Excellent. Now I got an idea. I got a flow for things, Nicole. Now I can see where this is all going. All right, who's stepping up? Who's ready? Who's ready to take a crack at this?
I saw John swallow really hard, so I think John's ready to go.
I mean, sure, we'll go with me. My idea is not as good as that one, but I was looking at kind of some other ideas, events that are kind of out in Disneyland as well as over at Universal. And I'm a little surprised Disney doesn't have a graduation theme party or like a grad night or something like that. Because I know they do a huge deal grad night over at Disneyland, as well as Universal does it. I mean, it'd be a perfect event to get those local college students in, or even high school students in, to keep it kind of more family oriented and everything with that, to bring in the families, as well as a lot of people go down there to celebrate graduating as kind of that last hurrah trip. And again, I think Epcot would be the perfect place for that. Again, just based on, obviously, you've got the option to have multiple drinks. For some people, it's kind of that rite of passage of drinking around the world a little bit, and that kind of plays into that a little bit, that last hurrah.
Hey, you graduated high school? Get
I was just thinking
let's make that very clear. You're not going to drink.
Hey, it was a rite of passage for me before I went to college. My old man gave me some Bacardi 151, and he's like, "Here you go, kid. Get ready to rock and roll." Right? I'm dead serious. He did that with each of us, even my little sister, who was only like 3'9" at the time. Right? Like, I'm exaggerating. I hope she's listening. But she's not. But yeah, I mean, obviously not the teenagers, John, but that's fun. I think Disney World would benefit from doing more of that kind of stuff for sure.
Yeah, especially, I mean, you've got some of the big universities down there, like Central Florida, UCF, kind of, it's all right there. I mean, they do a ton with Universal, I've seen over the past couple of years, and I'm really surprised they don't do more with Disney in that sense, because it's really surprising, because usually those that want the theme parks, they want both sides of the theme parks. So that's kind of surprising that you get it in California, but you don't see it in the East Coast.
All right. Not bad, John. Not bad.
I think the biggest one that they're not bringing over from Disneyland to Disney World in scale is the May the 4th after hours parties, right? If you were going to tell me one that they should definitely do and bring over, I believe this year they expanded it to like 3 dates. Before it was just 1 or 2, right? And my guess is by the end of 2027, it's going to have 13 dates on it, right? Because there are that many Star Wars fans that'll do it. But that should be something that they do for a week or 2 weeks at Disney World too.
Yeah, I had some thoughts about that actually. But I was out at Disneyland this year for Season of the Force, and I think it was for the first party that they had. We didn't end up attending it, just with the 5 of us, and it being the kids' first trip out there, not knowing how the time change would go. One of the first nights, it didn't seem like the best idea. However, you think you see people dressed up and like ready to go in Galaxy's Edge on a day-to-day basis, bounding to characters and stuff. The people walking in for this party, it was like, it was incredible. I mean, truly, like the thought, the detail, and everything else. That is a fan kind of event, and certainly, I think you could see similar popularity East Coast with something like that.
You know, in LA, they dress like that even when they're not going to a Star Wars fan event. So
yeah, that might have been the confusion. Yeah.
Just a lot of dudes out there with their lightsabers in their hands.
That's so many.
Okay, so the three of you guys took some variations on existing Disney events and made it your own, and kind of, you know, you're talking about those things. I was trying to come up with something that they haven't done before, but maybe taking elements of what they're capable. So humor me with this.
Oh boy.
I'm excited.
The Olympics at World Showcase. So here's my thought, whether it's summer or winter, whenever the Olympics are on, you have a X amount of week festival at World Showcase.
Just pause really quick. I almost hate you right now because I literally was going down the path of a celebration of sports, and part of my celebration of sports was the Olympics at the World Showcase.
Okay,
right?
well, hang on.
We did not discuss this beforehand.
No,
right?
and you just stole a show idea concept that we have too, buddy.
After 5 seasons, this is what happens, Ryan.
Wow.
Right? I'm going to let you carry on.
Amazed that there's that much. You guys are really starting to think the same. That's.
I kind of want to vomit, but I'm going to let you finish. But when you're done, I want to carry out to what's outside of it.
Okay, so this is, I'm going to zero in and focus on what I'm doing. So Olympics at World Showcase. So I'm envisioning whether it's summer or winter, how fun would it be to have some screens up and showing the Olympics live from around the globe, being at World Showcase and being in those countries and seeing people root for the teams or the players or whatever events going on in World Showcase, right? For those countries, right? I know, Ryan, you were there where the soccer game with France and kind of had that vibe. That's what I'm thinking about. And it's, you know, I'm thinking especially the winter one because, you know, there's really kind of a lull in what's going on that time of year. It's would be a good time to kind of do that, but you could do it with the summer too. And now I'm thinking, now you have that whole Olympic theme. You can do the food round. You could sell some great crossover Olympic Disney merchandise, right? That kind of had that theme and had Disney in it, and even do it pavilion by pavilion, country by country. Think of waving the flags and the national pride people would have. Then I would do on the, maybe to kick it off or the middle or the end, I would do a Run Disney event that make sure it went through World Showcase, right? So you get those athletic fans in there participating with that. Heck, I would do a Bike Disney event like the Tour de France and throw the bikes in there. And, you know, forget that. I'll do a Louisa's Liftoff weightlifting contest, right? And everyone could get on the podiums and stage and let's throw down some weightlifting, you know, right in the middle of the American Gardens there. Convert that into a competition of
Carl. Wide world of sports, man.
Yeah,
that's the perfect place,
right? Like you're right for the stuff, but since we're speaking the same language, right? Like you can have all those events at ESPN's Wide World of Sports and actually make it worth people's while for once to actually go to it.
Go there, I know, right? Yeah. I'm thinking about the international theme of the Olympics tied into World Showcase and how that would work, and you know, certainly some of that, and of course, you know, I think one of the events that you could organize and be maybe with that hard ticket would be a drinking around the world competition, right? You could actually give out gold and silver medals and bronze medals for people, you know.
Beer Olympics. All right, let's make it happen.
Those Olympics are out there. Think about what you get. You got different categories. You could have beer, wine, cocktails, different things, and Ryan and I and a bunch of our friends at MVPs can have lots of silver and gold medals, and John will have the occasional bronze.
It's going to be the Irish guy, the German guy, and the other guy who's just there for the ride.
I'm Irish, right?
Yeah, I know. I didn't want to admit it to everybody else, though. Believe it or not, Mackie kind of gives that away, buddy.
Yeah. That's actually more Finnish than it is Irish, but
is it really?
Yeah. But Carl, one thing I'm a little disappointed you didn't include in your lineup there is your coveted ECV race.
I want to see that. I really do.
You could. That would be after that. We would have the Special Olympics with the ECV race, right? After that, so
this is turning into a specially ticketed week and a half worth of events. This is amazing. I love this.
Yes,
everybody stays at All Star Sports too.
I'm voting for Olympics at World Showcase.
I love it. My thought, Carl, was not specifically to that, but I was thinking of celebrating that as part of it was just the celebration of sports, right? Disney actually has a rich history of sports tied with Disney. They've been partners with the NFL. They've been partners with MLB. They've got Goofy doing freaking sports instructional videos that are 30, 40 years old, right? They've got a bunch of stuff that they've always incorporated. They've got the MVP for the Super Bowl every single year, right? And the World Series every single year that's going to Disney. So, it makes sense to do something like that. Absolutely. ESPN in that area, the All-Star Sports, getting that part of it built up is great too. And that experience with being there in France when they won the World Cup was mind-blowing. I could only imagine how that would be for like bobsledding and Germany or wherever it might be, right? I think that's a really cool idea.
I think it could be cool in some of the pavilions too, like sports that are less familiar to Americans, right? Like if you're going to the Canadian pavilion, have something out there that describes curling or something like that, right? That
you could do demos of that. You could have the ping pong competition in China, right? You could
something, right? Like something that's more popular to that particular country that maybe Americans aren't as familiar with. And maybe you've got one of the student ambassadors there that's talking about, this is why we love it. This is exciting. This was, when I was a kid, we went to these matches or whatever, right? And build that enthusiasm. Because that's part of why it's really cool for the World Cup in France, right? Like it's a lifeblood sport. It's something that the people there just feel so deeply and have national pride in. So it's exciting to be a part of that celebration.
And it attaches that edutainment aspect that Epcot especially is supposed to be all about, right? Sure. So I love that. I will say the one thing you said, Carl, was you said that you thought it would be good in winter because there's a little lull there. I actually would do the Summer Olympics. And the reason why I would do the Summer Olympics is really because if you're going to do an event with screens, right, where people are monitoring things, it's a good time in the summer to just sit and have a drink and watch a screen.
Oh yeah, look, I was doing both. I could do it summer and winter, right?
But the other thing I was thinking about is currently the festival of what am I thinking of? The Flower and Garden Festival runs way too long.
Yes,
right.
Agreed.
Festival of the Arts is way too short.
Yep.
And the other festival, Flower and Garden, is way too long. You can cut out some of Flower and Garden and make that more appropriate by then having an Olympics-based festival, right? And it's only every 4 years, or every 2 years if you're doing it.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's awesome. Foods from around the world already exist. It'd be really easy to pull off.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could have a schnitzel eating contest too.
Would you like a schnitzel? Kielbasa? Okay. What else?
What else?
I just got back from Germany, so let's do it.
What else? Any other concepts? I know you were thinking of a couple of them, Nicole. So that was the mainstream one. You got something a little different?
I do. And you know what, Carl? I was thinking a little bit more about the refined dude.
Oh,
with this idea. Wait.
Did he pop up because you said refined or because I said the old guy?
I'm listening, Nicole.
So much of what we think about with Disney is family focused and kid focused, and it should be, because obviously, that's a huge part of the destination. But I was thinking of an event that really is going to be adult focused. I'm thinking probably 21 plus, and it would take place in Epcot. I imagine I really think time of year wouldn't matter too much, but probably we don't want to be too much January where it could still be chilly in the evening, because I'm picturing an alfresco dining experience where we shut down World Showcase to day guests. Maybe you make a little path there so they can head to the Skyliner if that's how they head back to their resort or whatever. But we've closed it down and we've taken some of those areas where you might be able to host private parties on typical nights, right? Like where we watch the fireworks from as an agency over near the UK pavilion. There's stuff right as you come across the bridge. There's a large piazza there in different places. We're setting up tables and we're having a true taste of Epcot, where the various pavilions are each represented by a multi-course menu, where each one either has a food or beverage throughout the course of the evening. It's going to be a set menu, right? Because we're serving all these people in a short period of time. But each country designs a dish or a drink that they think is reflective of their culture and that somehow blends into everything. And I'm not a chef, so I don't know how you make them all blend, but they're smart. They'll figure that out. I imagine that as each course is kind of coming about, they're going to have a general pace to the evening. So maybe we're piping in music. Maybe some of it's played live on the stage that fits the culture of that area. But my vision is that each country is able to contribute a menu item. And whether that's a specific beverage or that's a dish, obviously we're thinking fairly small plates just based on the number of countries, right? But you're going to have this really diverse menu that the chefs there are smart enough to make somehow mesh together. And I imagine even if there's live music being performed on the stage, that it would be piped, throughout, and maybe it's reflective of the country whose course you're enjoying. And then at the time of dessert, we have a culmination with a show on the lagoon that's different from the typical, whatever the evening show for Epcot happens to be at the time, right? So we're taking advantage of all the pyrotechnic abilities and those types of things that you have there. So you end your night with this specialty show that you can only get by attending. And, it would have a decent ticket price to it. It would have to, because of the food and beverage being offered. But I'm thinking, this is a dinner that you might be seated for kind of as the sun is setting around 6:30, 7 o'clock, and it's going to go on for hours, that it's a true culinary experience. It's not based on the rides. It's not necessarily character meet and greets and those kinds of things. The star of the show are going to be the chefs that are preparing the food and everything there. But that for so many people, the food and beverage in Epcot is an afterthought. But there's some truly amazing things that are offered there. And I feel like people like us who are able to go to Disney more often, right? And so we're not as focused every single time we go into the park of getting on every single attraction. We take a little bit more time to sit and enjoy those meals. But that's not necessarily the case for everyone.
And it's the case, Nicole. It's the case.
It's definitely the case for Carl.
I said for everyone. I put Carl's in our group.
I really like the concept of this. We do something in Chicago called Restaurant Week. I don't know if it's only a Chicago thing or not.
Yeah, that around here.
And I'm sure it's the same thing then. You pay one price, right? And that's what I would apply to this too. You pay one price and you get 6 meals out of the 11 countries, right? You don't want to give them all away because you could drive people to come back multiple nights that way, right? But you get like 6 of the countries or 5 of the countries each night. I think that would be a really cool idea. I also think it would be really cool to bring back for the nighttime show. I actually think it would be really cool to bring back the last show that they just had, right? Which it's gone from my brain now because it no longer exists. Harmonious, right? It would be really cool to bring back Harmonious because Harmonious was a celebration of culture, of the different countries around the world. So to have that as your evening show, I think would actually be cool because it would throw back to people that like knew that it once exists too. You know, just a thought. I thought it would be pretty cool.
I like this idea, Nicole, because it harks back to the original opening of Food and Wine Festival in 1996. One of the things when the festival was much smaller and designed to bring people in the off season of the fall that they did was there were featured celebrity chefs dinners every night. They were hard to get.
Oh, wow, that'd be cool.
They were hard to buy into and hard to get into. And you could go and there would be in a location similar to the back of the house pavilions that exist, the one by the UK, where you would have a very elegant dinner prepared by a famous chef. And it was a series. And then in 1997, they brought sommeliers around and did wine tasting events too at it and kind of grew it. But the celebrity chef dinners were fantastic and coveted to get into. And, you know, it was minimalist because the chef and his crew was only preparing a meal maybe for 75 to 100 people, right? Something manageable like a small wedding. And it was the best chefs. In 1997, Julia Child, Emeril Lagasse, Paul Buscos, all were there, and they did a big fundraiser for hunger relief organizations around the globe.
Oh, cool.
Off it. And it was a really high ticket events. They did several evenings of that for there, but it had those, you know, specifics. They were focused in the countries. I also like what you're saying because I had the privilege when Epcot opened is meeting the three chefs of the Chefs de France, Buscos, Lenotre, and Roger Verger. And I was actually dating the niece of one of them, but I won't name which one, so that'll save the chef at the time. But and seeing that, meeting them, and talking to them about food and cuisine was just mind blowing because they were the pinnacles of, you know, of the finest chef schools in France that have, you know, collaborated on this effort. Of the restaurant. The restaurant's not quite as what it used to be in Epcot. I know it's kind of fallen out of favor, but it was certainly one of the highlights back then. But I really like that concept because it brings back some of the old days of the Food and Wine Festival, elevating it a little bit. And you certainly could do, you know, something for a good cause as well. It once the festival expanded, became more popular, and it went from just the original 9 or 11 countries into, you know, they've had upwards, if you look at the history of it, over 195 countries have done food tastings at Epcot, you know. And how many countries are in the world are there? Like 250 or something?
That's pretty close to all of them.
Right. And so to have something like that, I like that. I think you definitely would be a hard ticket event. I like the idea, Ryan, of bringing back the fireworks. Illuminations with all the music from the respective countries would be great to bring that back. And that's certainly something I would get my vote and my attention.
You know what kind of caught my eye as you were talking, Carl, is that, like, you know, you said that they did this kind of in a way before, and then you threw some dates out there. It was like mid-90s is when they were doing some of the stuff, right? And if you think about it, right, like that's pretty cool considering the fact that some of the food and beverage industry didn't even explode until about 10 years after that.
Right.
Like 2008 to 2006 is when we saw the craft brew explosion. And then the last half of that, the last 4 years of that, you also started seeing the craft breweries became more popular if they had the brew pubs that had like the specific specific meals to go along with it. And that's carried on since 2016 now. It hasn't exploded like it did then, but it's still wildly popular. And like an event like this, now probably be twice as popular as it would have been back then. So it's like, they were just ahead of their time, maybe at that point, right?
If you think about it, it wasn't in vogue to be a wine expert or snob until the early 2000s, right? And that, people all of a sudden turned into, oh, let's go to Napa Valley and let's do that.
Right.
And part of the originations when we told the story of the Epcot Food and Wine Festival was they used to go to these conventions for wine, and people would go and there'd be different people from the United States. They said, let's do it at Epcot to open it up to everyone to get an appreciation from wine. And they brought those festivals that were, in places like, Colorado or whatever to Florida, and they expanded it to the parks and the hotels, and they all of a sudden brought wine into Orlando that was kind of desolate as far as that. So I like that. So thinking on the adult thing, I'm going to kind of steal from someone down the road and see what if Disney would take this event and put a twist on it. How about a Mardi Gras celebration at the Port Orleans and New Orleans Hotel, right? On the river, the Sassagoula River, and flowing into Disney Springs.
Yeah.
So I want to put on a big old parade somewhere. I don't know if you weave it through the hotel park or whatever. The beads from the roofs and the balconies of people in their hotels throwing out at the parade. I want
family destination
all over the place.
Yeah,
Larry, bead throwing is harder than people imagine.
He just hit Granny in the face.
Big old drinks. I want big drinks with funny straws coming out of them. At the Bloom Lagoon pool. I just want debauchery and drinks, and then bring it all down to some jazz music at all the restaurants there. Beignets for everybody, Ryan. And then spill it over into nighttime into Disney Springs, and bring blues and jazz and all that great music down there at nighttime. Have the clubs put it on, and have everybody have the merch. Can you imagine Disney themed beads? You think people collect pins? People will be all over these beads trying to get them, and
one of
grab
the
them as they're
things
tossed in the air.
that they did when we were I had the opportunity to attend an event prior to Tiana's Bayou Adventure opening, and they actually took and hosted an event at House of Blues in downtown Disney with the musicians that worked on the soundtrack for that film. So if you start bringing in they were phenomenal. We were actually also supposed to have some stuff happening outdoors in that area of the park. And of course, in true Orlando fashion, in June, there were thunderstorms that came through, and they moved us indoors into a space in the Contemporary. And I'm glad they did in some ways, because we also had some of the other performers that were a part of that project performing indoors, where we were a little bit more captive audience and you could hear and appreciate what they were doing. But certainly Disney has people already that they've got relationships with that they can bring in for some of these things and really have an authentic piece of that celebration as well. Do you
remember so think of there's all your character meet and greet, rare characters, right? From that show that could be on it. Sure. You could think of probably some other Disney shows that had it. The Aristocats had a great jazz scene where they were singing jazz and blues and everything. You could bring, those are kind of lost characters from the past. Anybody who is at a tie-in with, kind of that New Orleans, throw some pirates in there. What the heck? Anything that's associated with New Orleans, and make it a big old adult party. And I think by having it up at the Port Orleans Hotel, it's maybe far enough away that people would say, I'm not bringing my kids there. That looks like trouble.
And not even that, but you wouldn't even have to worry about that, right? It's so secluded back where it is that you don't have to worry about it. And you have boat transportation there that the only people you're going to mess with are the people in Saratoga Springs. And I'm sorry, that resort is not going to be filled that time of year anyway. So you can just avoid putting people in the buildings that are along the river, and you're good, right? You can make that a fully adult party, no problem. That's probably the ideal location for it. So yeah, I hate to agree with you again, Carl, but
This has been happening more often where you two are
party.
agreeing. This is kind of concerning.
I'm getting so sick of agreeing with Carl. I don't know if it's that I'm getting older now, right? Like we've been doing this for 5 years. I'm a different guy than I was 5 years ago. The kids have aged me. I'm catching up to Carl. I don't know, but it's,
Or if I've worn you down.
worn you down is the more likely reason. Yes.
He's just gotten over you is really what it is.
It's not life wearing me down or my children giving me wisdom. It's Carl. He's just been beating on me for 5 years.
Yeah, but if the result is we figured out a good way to have a party, what's the harm?
I'm down.
Yeah.
And that's where we've always had our, no matter where else we disagreed, that was one thing we always had in common.
Absolutely. So we've got a few ideas out there. Anyone else want to finish off the show with one great big idea?
I don't know about a great big idea, but I did actually have a thought, like kind of in line with what Nicole was talking about with doing like a villainous kind of a party at Hollywood Studios. I actually thought about like you could really do something year round like that, and you could just change the theme, right? Because you've got Hollywood Studios, which, as we talked about before, is this supposed to be this representation of a movie sets, right? Like that's the whole concept of it. Is this is where Disney's movie sets are all coming from, and you could very easily take areas and re-theme them at night 4 or 5 times a year, kind of like a festival at Epcot, but you have these different festivals now at Hollywood Studios. You could do a section of the year where it's like the 100 years of Disney, right? The wonder of Disney nights. And you could have in those areas 100 different characters. The top 100 characters from Disney could be roaming around at any given time, right? And that's a big draw for people. People will literally go run Disney events, never train a day in their life, just so that they can go see like 2 or 3 characters that they don't get to see in the parks otherwise, right? So you can have a whole character event in Hollywood Studios. It's just themed after whatever super special character. You can take ABC Studios and turn it into, or Commissary, and you can turn it into a character meet and greet, quick service character meet and greet, kind of like what they do at Cafe 4 over at Universal, right? And you could just have random characters walking through there that make sense for the time period. You have all the different stages that you could bring up, old stage shows. You could do a rendition of Old Yeller for Carl if you wanted to, right? Like there's a bunch of stuff that you could do throughout the year, just utilizing that space very much in the same vein as what Nicole was talking about with the villains. I think that could be applied to hopefully someday Marvel, right? That could be applied to a whole Star Wars night, not just a Galaxy's Edge. That could be the Mighty Ducks and the celebration of sports, right? You could bring Legend of Bagger Vance and the Mighty Ducks out if you wanted to, but the Bagger Vance might be a little bit harder to pull off. But you could they have all of these concepts in 100 years of movies that they could be celebrating constantly in Hollywood Studios, and people would pay money to go as long as it was enough of an attraction, enough of an IP.
Well, I mean, you think about it, right? People are paying now to go to the after hours events, which are not themed. It's access to rides with smaller crowds. So if you combine that then with characters, you've got something. I'm already paying just to go this. Now it's an added bonus. I'm thinking, I want to say that it was the D23 magazine that came out. They did at the 100th anniversary of Disney. Each issue of that focused on different decades, right? Like celebrating characters from decades. You could almost break down things that way, that for a given month, we're celebrating the original characters from the 20s into the 30s, and then the 30s to 40s and so on, and attract different people. You'd have different rare characters. You'd have some classic movies that came up, some newer things that appeal to different people. There's a lot of different ways I could see you organizing something like that, where you could plan on a couple parties every month at Hollywood Studios that just fit that mold. And it's more interesting than just an after hours.
And the more I think about it, right, like the more parties that you can do in Animal Kingdom and Hollywood Studios, the better, right? And it's I think it's a benefit not only to those parks, but also to Magic Kingdom and Epcot, and not having to do them there, right? So if Hollywood Studios, if you do it right, and you're just focused on getting everything done, right? Not taking your time. You just like you would be at Magic Kingdom for most people, right? That's a 3/4 day park. It's a very easy park to close at 7:00 without people saying, I'm not going to go to that park that day because it closes at 7, right? Same thing with Animal Kingdom, right? Animal Kingdom, you do close Animal Kingdom sometimes at 5:00 and 6:00, and people are totally fine with it, right? Why not use that space? Animal Kingdom's harder because of the animals, right? But why not use that space in those hours where you're not kicking people out early? You're not taking anything away from them. So I think they're realizing that with the Jollywood Nights and some of the other things they're starting to do at Hollywood Studios, but they should keep expanding that.
I think the Animal Kingdom is a really interesting thought. I tried to really brainstorm some stuff that could happen over there in the evenings, and it is limited because so much of the park does, you get the safari and the trails and that kind of stuff, and that has to close, and you don't want it to be like you're not going to do a big pyrotechnic show, right? Because animals. But there's some really cool stuff that I think you could maybe play on with stuff that's happening in Pandora. They've got that huge waterfront area that had the show at one point. Could you retheme, and do something that's a little bit more phantasmic like without it being the firework piece of it? Drones. And not being as frightening, for animals. Like there's stuff that they could do over there. There could be a dining experience over there,
Nicole,
right?
I think
some interesting culture stuff.
I think you're onto something, Nicole. And I think with the reincarnation of Dino Land becoming the Central Americas, and that place is not going to be, so far we haven't seen another animal trek there or animal intensive. I think you have that connected to the other half of Asia, and then you have
side of the park.
And then you have Pandora, where you may have a majority of that leaning for it. The safari animals all go into their homes and beds at night, so they're out of range. You still, from like human noise and music. Right. The only animals you have to be concerned with is those at the base of the tree of life. But if you focus that into the other sections of the park, you're going to be far enough away from them. Even if you had, more like a food tasting, food safari to go on. I mean,
that would be cool, right?
They're doing more things, along those lines that are tied to the animals. But I think they can do that, especially if they start expanding where the footprint for that park is going to be, again, away for it towards the parking lot. They start growing in that direction, it might lend itself to something. And if you've got to have the Central Americas, we all know it's fiesta forever, right? Down in Central America. So you could certainly have some parties there in the evening that would put the Mexico Pavilion at Epcot to shame.
You know what? Just make it adults only and charge
Carnival
and all inclusive. Yeah, Carnival. There you go. Done.
There you go.
Get some beans.
Done. Well, there you have it, folks. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us this.
Thank you for having me
this season to get us in the festive mood of thinking about celebrations that only your MVPs could come up with. So until next time, party on, dudes.
Party on, Garth. Later, dudes.
Later, dudes.
Later, dudes.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Dudes Dish Disney. Please check us out on social media. On Facebook at Dudes Dish Disney. On Instagram at Dudes Dish Disney. On X at Disney_Dish. Please check us out on YouTube. Like and subscribe at Dudes Dish Disney. Please visit our sponsor, Magic Vacations, at magicvacations.net. More than just a travel agency, Magic Vacations has over 60 Magic Vacation planners committed to bringing you white glove concierge service. Using a Magic Vacation Planner allows you to spend more time making memories and less time worrying about the details. For all of your Disney, Universal, cruise, and global travel, go to magicvacations.net. Magic Vacations. Discover the magic of travel.